At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Hey folks, Dr. Doug here. Thanks for listening to us today. You know, immigration is an interesting thing. So often we've been having all of this politicizing going on about immigration, but the one thing we never think about is the people and what they're going through. And today I'm really pleased to have Dhenu Maru, an attorney for immigration that's out of Chicago. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
I'm looking forward to chatting with you about this issue. It's a very interesting topic, I think, and also very personal to me.
Well, and that's what's really interesting. I mean, you've had quite a story because you came here when you were what, 10 years old?
Yeah.
Okay. Share with the audience your story, because I think that'll be a good kickoff for, what we can talk about a little bit more.
Sure. So we have to put this in the frame of time because it was early 90s, and I feel like, the world's gotten so much closer since then. But early 90s was when we found out that the application that my uncle had put for my family more than 10 years before had, finally come to the point where there was an interview required. And so I remember my parents kind of rushed to some kind of an interview, but I was 10 years old and I didn't fully understand what was going on and what was going to be the end result of this. And so, parents were kind of going through the motion. And I think that even the parents didn't know whether this would be a successful move, whether it would be, something that we would have to come back from. And so they didn't know how to break it to us, because if they said, look, we're moving forever, and then it turned out we had to come back, that wouldn't be good. Yeah. And so what they said to us was, we're going to go to, visit your cousins and visit your uncle and aunt for some period of time, and then, we're going to come back. And in my mind, I remember thinking, I'm going to go away for a year and then be back. And so I told all my friends, don't forget about me. I'm coming back.
Oh, well, that was probably a smart thing. So what happened? You obviously got over here.
Yeah. I remember the day we flew. It was the first time I had ever flown in my life. And so it was all about, getting to the airport. And when I thought about what America would be like, all I could think about was I'm going to get to see snow again for the first time, actually. And so I was really excited about seeing snow. And I remember having, very vague understanding of what America means and what it really involves. And through the eyes of children, I thought, well, my cousins bring me candy every time they come back, so probably the children there eat a lot of candy. And I thought, well, that means they probably have rotten teeth, because that's what my parents keep telling me. If you eat a lot of candy, you get rotten teeth. And so I had that image, and then I always remember hearing about snow and winters being cold, and we didn't really have much of a winter where I lived. And so I remember thinking, well, if it's so cold, I wonder if all the water is ice, and then what do people drink? And it was just, your mind goes crazy thinking about all the crazy possibilities of what it could be. But it's interesting because what I really didn't have any understanding of was the cultural difference, and, never crossed my mind. I mean, what crossed my mind was snow and candies and Disney World, and not cultural differences, and that's really what hits you when you first come.
Yeah. So you got here, and all of a sudden you are here in reality. And, it's interesting, and I want to go into the cultural differences, but it's interesting, I think, how many people set expectations based on maybe moving to a new location or whatever that happens to be. And so often those expectations are really not reality.
No, And especially when you haven't been fully, connected with that reality. And, we've gotten so much more global now. So I would like to think that people today have a more realistic picture, but probably not.
Probably not.
No matter what.
Yeah,
probably not. Yeah.
I have friends over in Vietnam that want to come over, and obviously at this point in time, and it's going to be really tough. But what I find is, as I talk to them, there's this general expectation that I'm thinking, you know what? If they get over here, it's not going to be what they think it's going to be. And I think that makes it tough. So you got over here, and let's talk about the cultural things. You got over here as a 10-year-old. What are some of the things that you experienced?
Well, right away, first of all, and I noticed, when I first came here, we stayed with our cousins for a couple of months. And so the school there, it was a small town in Connecticut, and very little diversity. I mean, I stood out like a sore thumb. And, and so I wasn't used to that because I was used to kind of being, in a sea of brown.
Right, right.
And I wasn't used to sticking out. So that was the first thing, is that, somehow I feel like everybody's looking, and I don't know whether to look back or look down or, And then, I did know that English would be the language that I should speak because my cousins would speak English when they came to visit us. So I was prepared for that. And I had learned English as the language in which we were educated in school. So that was not the difficulty, but the accent was. And I remember, sometimes not understanding how to say certain names and people, getting upset that I wasn't saying their name correctly, but they weren't saying my name correctly and I didn't know how to correct them, and so it was a little bit of that. And then it was also like the norms for schooling. I wasn't used to classrooms that only had 20 to 30 people. Our classrooms had 60 plus.
Oh, wow.
And it was a very, I think it was much closer to the British system, where it was kind of, the teacher talked, the students just stayed quiet, and we were told to put our heads on the desk when it was quiet time. We were told, we had to answer a question standing up. We couldn't answer the question from our seats. And so I remember raising my hand in school, and when the teacher asked the question, I stood up to answer, and everybody started laughing because that wasn't the norm in the school anymore,
Oh, funny.
And so it was a little bit of that. And then, unfortunately with children, it's like the other children don't understand you just as much as you don't understand them. And so there were a few kids who used to, now I think of it as bullying. At the time, I was just like, I just want to fit in. I just want to be liked. I don't know why nobody likes me,
Oh, interesting. So what other cultural differences, as you were growing up, what other cultural differences did you find made it really at least a little bit difficult for you?
So other than the accent and the, names and being bullied, that was the worst thing. And the other thing was, realizing that although we were, not badly off where I came from. In India, we were considered middle class. We had everything we needed. I never really thought about money in my life until I came to the U.S. and suddenly, we were trying to convert rupees to dollars, and we had a lot fewer dollars than we had rupees. And, all of a sudden I started having to become very conscious of price and what I could buy and couldn't buy. And, the limtation that just the financial restrictions imposed was significant. And another thing was the expectation of space. I came from Mumbai, which is a big city in India, and getting a closet-sized apartment in Mumbai is considered a luxury. So we came from, we were living, I think, 9 people in a 1-bedroom apartment in Mumbai, and we didn't ever feel like it was short of space. I mean, we felt like, we were lucky, like
Right.
truly lucky, And so when I came to the U.S. and I just saw people with, having their own rooms and these huge spaces, and still, adding 9 people to the environment made it crowded, and people had this expectation of just having so much space. Like, that to me was also very new. Like, I never had the concept of my own room until I came here, and then the amount of space that people expected was very different, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and, I read an interesting book a couple of years ago, and I'm not going to name it and also, but it was about a fellow who actually had traveled to India for many years, lived in London for a while, lived out in the west coast of the United States for a while. And it was interesting, his perception of the culture and what he came back with. And I found it really interesting because it really intrigued me about his comments about the Indian culture. And I think this is true very much of Asia and that whole area, that he said once he made a friend, they were a friend for life. And that's not something that necessarily happens here in the U.S. And as I've traveled over into some different Asian countries, I've seen the same thing, that there's just a much different experience that can be had, because once you develop a friendship, they really care about you. They love you. They're just there to make sure that you're happy, and it's just amazing. Did you find that when you got over here that cultural difference was, I mean, did you even experience that as a cultural difference for you, or was that just something that I'm
friendships, yeah, for sure. I thought that, one of the differences that I experienced, but I think I realized it a little bit later, is that people here move often for opportunities, for college, whereas I don't remember people in India moving that often. If they move, they stay within Bombay or Mumbai, and they move maybe to a different suburb at most, but they don't ever just exit your life, And I feel like, that was one thing that I noticed more over here, where, it was normal for children to move away for college, to move away for work, and to even move after they got work. Maybe they found better opportunities somewhere and they move again. And then I ended up doing the same thing. I ended up moving a bunch of times in my life, but in India, we still own the same home that I grew up in. And so, there is that stability there, in terms of the people, and the places, and live in,
How do you think that difference affects the culture here in the United States with all of that moving and in some cases, and obviously it's not true all the way around, but in some cases just not that sense of deep connection that you almost immediately feel when you get over to India or other places like that?
Well, I do agree with you that it depends a little bit in the U.S., and I've learned that also later on, because from Connecticut I moved to Kentucky, and when I moved to Kentucky, I did see that sort of deep sense of belonging that people had in small towns, and that there was that connection, that that draw to each other, and that bonding in small towns, and not so much in the larger cities, or where I came first. So I think that didn't really touch me initially, because I was new and I was looking to kind of blend in. Instead of, so I was looking for people to accept me into their group. So if they had a very fixed set of group, that would have made it even harder. So the fact that I was able to kind of find new friendships when I came, that was in some ways comforting.
And did you find, as you look back now, because obviously as a child you just kind of accept what's going on, did you find that, would you say that there was a fair amount of challenge and adversity that you experienced growing up as an immigrant?
I did. I definitely did. And I think that it was partly due to the fact that I was 10 and my classmates were 10 and they didn't know what to make of me. They didn't know why I spoke differently. They didn't know why I dressed differently, and it caused them to sort of, look at me like I was weird and strange and, treat me like, oh, you shouldn't be near me or, and that was difficult for me to, like, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm just trying to make a friend.
Right.
And why are they not receptive? Why do they not like me? What have I done to be not liked? And so that was difficult for me initially. And I remember the first few days, I mean, this is really sad, but when I first, my parents were trying obviously their hardest to find work and they were working long days. And so sometimes I would come home and, my parents would be so occupied in their own struggles. And all I would do was cry every single day for the first few months. Coming home from school, I would cry. And that must have been, very heartbreaking for my parents. And I remember, hearing conversations about whether or not we should continue to stay here, whether we should go back. But I think they believed in the long term. And I'm glad that they stuck around, and I'm glad that they believed in that long term, because it did start all gelling together after, the initial phases.
And as much as you can think about it, and as much as later on as you became an adult and considered your parents and so forth, what kind of challenges did they face as new immigrants to the country?
I think for them to start over was very difficult. My dad had an established business in India, and it was well run. He was well known in the community, and so he owned a bookstore, both retail and wholesale, with in partnership with my uncle. And to come here and to think, well, what do we do now? Where do we even start? And from being the owner of a business to having to be sort of the entry-level employee someplace. That must have been a hit. And I remember my whole family sort of, put their hands together to make it financially. I mean, my aunt, my uncle, my mom, everyone who was previously not so involved in the business suddenly started having to be involved to help my father out.
And ultimately, was it a better move for them?
Ultimately, yes. Ultimately, I think they have found, their own community now. In Kentucky, they have good friends. They have found a comfortable life where, they can be at peace and happy. And my dad and mom are both retired now. And so they're definitely having a good time, and they're lucky in that they're able to spend a good amount of time with their friends in India and family in India, as well as in the United States now. So they're able to, manage. But I think at their age, it's a little bit more difficult to assimilate. So they definitely probably had their own struggles and a longer cycle to assimilate, to learn the ropes, to learn the systems. And I felt some of that too, I felt the difficulty in understanding the system. And that probably is what I think led me to become a lawyer.
Okay, and I was going to get to that because, it almost seems, what do you think the pure motivation was for your parents to move here?
I think that my dad's brother lived here, and he had moved here, oldest brother, in the 60s, and he's the one who applied for everyone. And I'm sure that he must have told them that, yes, it's probably better for your children in the long term and for their education. My parents, and my uncle and aunt and, my whole family, the adults in the family, 100%, they did it for us. They did it for the kids. I mean, for themselves, they were comfortable, they were settled, but they understood that we would have better opportunities if they moved.
And you know what? I think that's an important thing to bring up, is the sacrifice that parents make so often. And I think as we look at those who are immigrating into the country or desiring to, that really, in many respects, the parents are really sacrificing some amazing things in their lives because they want a better life for their children.
Yep. Yeah.
So how, based on all of your experiences now, and you work with people who are coming into the country from a legal standpoint, but how do you help them from the standpoint to understand the adversity that they're going to experience? And in general, how would you share with the audience that, because we all experience adversity one way or the other, immigration
Absolutely.
is probably one that is just really up there on the scale from the standpoint of the difficulty of it. How do people overcome adversity, and what has been your experience over your years and observing and helping others?
What I've observed is that one thing that really is, I think, that holds this whole transition together and holds people together during this transition is a sense of community. And so immigrants have this immigrant experience that everybody at any age, if you've moved from one country to a brand new country, from one culture to a brand new culture, you're experiencing a do-over like nothing you've ever experienced before. And so you can relate to other people who have similar experiences. And so that kind of relationship, that knowledge that, yes, today I'm going through this, but tomorrow I will be the one helping somebody else go through it. That brings immigrants together. And that is something that I feel like all of my clients, no matter their income level, no matter the legal path that they're coming from, no matter the country they're coming from, have this experience in common. It really bonds immigrants together. And the sense of family. I feel like families, when they immigrate together, become closer. Another thing that I've seen with my clients over and over is that maybe they don't immigrate with family. They find family here. And maybe they find a very distant friend, somebody who they didn't really have too much of a connection with in their own country, but they come here and they become close because now they are relying on each other.
And, as we've seen more and more immigration occur, there are more very specific communities for different groups that come in. How do you feel about that? I mean, at what point in time, it's almost like they come and then they create their own little, land.
Sure.
Right there, their community right there. So they bring their country in, and here they are again. What's your thoughts about that versus trying to break out and integrate into the overall community of the United States? Is it something that in some respects is difficult because of a bit of prejudice?
It's a very interesting question. And from my own experience, I know that having a small community initially, that incubation period, is really important in adjusting and in able to accept all the differences that you have to accept. And having that guide is really important. So in that sense, yeah. But in a more general sense, I think of it sort of like, you take a pool of yellow and you mix a little bit of red in it. You probably won't notice it when it's small. But as you start mixing more of that red, the entire pool will turn orange. You can't have the red turn yellow. And so in that sense, we all, when we have immigrants that come in, to a degree, we all change with them.
Yes.
And you see that even historically, the Irish immigrants, the Italian immigrants, we don't even think about those as immigrants because the pizza has become an American food.
Right.
And so as a country, we are all changing. And so this is what's so important to understand about immigration is that it doesn't only affect the immigrants themselves. It does affect the society as a whole. And we've gotten some really wonderful things from being accepting of immigrants in the past. But every new group that has ever come has initially faced adversity, has initially faced, well, you change, I won't change. And that has happened no matter which group of immigrants you're talking about. But now, some of the previous immigrants seem just American. And that's the beauty about the country of immigrants, right?
And we're all immigrants. My grandfather.
It's always evolving.
Yeah, my grandfather came from Norway. And so we're all immigrants. So what would you say, though, to the general population who, in some senses, have become very, very political, on one side or the other? Let's forget that for a minute. Let's look at a family that has gone through the proper channels, has maybe gotten your help, they've moved into an area. How do we help them integrate better, and how do we help them to feel more accepted within our country?
I think that's a really, really good question. And just asking that question itself shows a level of acceptance. So even if you make an attempt, making an attempt to reaching out is huge. It makes them feel less isolated. It makes them feel like they can reach, to somebody for help. That has been, I want to say, immeasurable in terms of the impact that has, especially early on. Early on, whenever you reach out to somebody and say, tell me, what is it like for you? Even just asking that question, asking the question of like, what can I do to help? Like for me, it would have been, just complete transformational for somebody to say, you can sit at my lunch table,
Yeah. And what do you think the responsibility of the immigrants are? I see certain areas that in my area, and of course where I happen to live, we just don't have that. But a ways away in a more metropolitan area, there are areas for the Asians, and there are areas for the Hispanics to some degree. And obviously they break out. But in many cases, they don't learn English. What as you work with your clients, is there recommendations you make to them relative to the language and other things for them to be able to integrate into the country?
I think integration definitely has to happen from both sides. And I think it's important for the immigrant family, even for their own economic well-being. My parents didn't study in English. I studied in English, but my parents learned English. And even for their own economic well-being, English was important for them to learn. And so sometimes what people may not realize is by not taking that time, because it is difficult to learn a brand new language, but not taking that time. And, what I find is that for my clients who speak less English, it's because they've had to just go dive into work and they'd never had the chance to learn English. Some of them really wish they had. And I think not taking that time to do it early on is a rookie mistake, because it just cuts off so many opportunities, even for the family themselves.
So although it's tough, you recommend that they do learn English.
Absolutely. And I think the best way to do it is by making friends outside of that comfort zone, and by reaching out and by having somebody reach out to them might make it easier for them to reach back out.
Okay, so you're an attorney. And you obviously work with people who are coming into the country and wanting to do it in an appropriate way. And I don't want to get political here, but what
Sure.
are your thoughts about those that are trying to get into the country in an inappropriate and non-legal way?
I want to say that, from their perspective, from the individual's perspective, it's everyone is trying to survive for their families, at least the majority of them. Of course, there will be some people who have, more nefarious,
Right.
intentions. But for most people, it's what's available for their family. I think that a lot of people would be not open, but would be desperate. They're desperate to be able to do it the right way. But there aren't always options available. And so one of the things that I really wish we could do is we could look at the whole immigration system and look at it in the light of our economic needs. Where do we have an economic need? And do we have a pathway to fill that? And if we don't, then can we create a pathway that makes sense, that works from both of those sides? Because what we find now is that we have a system that, one of my mentors used to say is like a road that has been patched over and patched over and patched over, but never remade.
And so you're suggesting that really we need to look at it from the perspective of not only how can we help them, but make it really that type of, both sides. How can we set it up so that they can become an integrated part of the country and also be a contributing part of the country so that they're experiencing their dreams and at the same time they're adding value to us?
Yeah, I think we unnecessarily make it as if, the two are opposite of each other, but they're actually similar. They have their aligned goals. We just have to have a system that aligns them.
Well, and I think as I read all of the anger and the hatred and that we see on social media and everywhere else, and I'm not here again to politicize and take sides one way or the other, but the one thing that I do recognize is somewhere we've lost our heart. We've lost that heartfelt feeling of people. And realizing that, we've got people that are trying to come in, and as you say, they may not have the means to hire you as an attorney to come in legally, and it doesn't make it necessarily right because, yes, a lot of nefarious people are trying to come in illegally
And
too.
there aren't pathways. I mean, you wouldn't believe how many depressing consultations I've had to have with people who say, I'm willing to do anything. I'm willing to pay you as much as you want. I'm willing to, sell everything I own. But I just want to get a social security number. I just want to become legal. I want to be able to work to my capacity and not have to work under my capacity every moment of the way. And I have to tell them there isn't a way. There is no legal option. And so many times you have to put a lid on a human's capacity of working, of contributing. And when you put that lid on their capacity as a system, that's bad for the entire country because we're not able to extract human potential then.
And do you see that as a necessary change then that we really consider as a country? Again, how do we do this in a way that we can really make it a positive experience and a win-win type of situation? Even more a collaboration, a collaborative effort where we experience the good that comes from that and they experience the good from that. What is your thoughts about that?
I mean, it is a very, very difficult question, but I think there are answers. But it really does require this. Like, this is the first step, right? To understand what immigration involves, to understand what it really means for a family that immigrates, and then to understand how we can make a system that logically aligns the goals of the country with the goals of that family. So we're not forcing in either direction. The system has to make it intuitive for a family who wants to do it right to be able to do it right.
Well, and I think you hit it on the head. Is if they're coming in for the right reasons, they want to contribute. They want their children to have a better experience overall in their lives, and how can we set up a system where they are literally able to contribute? I think that becomes one of the problems. Is how many of them come in and then automatically they're on welfare, and that really creates a burden financially for the country, versus coming in and having us as a country and as a people help to create opportunities where they can start to really contribute and experience that positive experience in their lives here.
Yeah. And, I think what I've learned is that we want to create a system which helps people to realize their potential so that we as a country can realize our potential.
It's not easy.
Not easy. Not easy. But these conversations is really what helps.
Well, I think so. And as you think about it, I mean, I'm sure we'll get different comments on this particular show from different sides. But again, I think that overall, this concept of really reframing our thought process and realizing that, you know what, we're all people, and we're all, seeking to have a better life. We're all seeking for our children to have a better life. And what can we do to help that and help to create that for others?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts that you have that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think, I like that note to end it on. I think it's a very, very good aspiration. And I hope that is kind of the direction that, our listeners start to think in. What can we do? How can we reach out? Even a small, meaningful action can be enormous in helping that person, that family, to really accept their new environment, to be a part of it, to contribute to it. And sometimes all it takes is, hello, you can sit with me, you can eat with me, you're welcome to come here, maybe offer to show them around the grocery store and how to do shopping if they're confused, or just ask them, what is it that I can help you with? Sometimes it's, trying to understand how to contact professionals, how to reach out to professionals, how to reach out to a lawyer. Sometimes it is how to, shop. What does it mean you have an e-coupon, Yeah. And so, little things that we don't even really think about, right?
Really make a difference. And I know we were laughing before we got on, officially. Your website and your company, SwagatUSA, and I looked at that initially and I'm going, okay, swag at USA, and I'm thinking, you're an attorney, why are you selling swag? And but there's a deeper meaning here. So would you explain to the audience what it really means?
Sure. So the word is swagat, and swagat means welcome. The meaning of that name is essentially welcoming somebody to USA, because that's the first feeling they need, is they need to feel like they're welcome, and there should be a place where they're welcome, and they're always welcome at my law firm. And that's the feeling I want to send to any family who needs answers, who needs solutions, who needs options, and wants to know legally how they can achieve their goals. Happy to help. And, please, if you know somebody who needs that, feel free to refer them. Or if you're a business owner, you want to hire somebody who needs a visa. Sometimes business owners have, never had the experience of having to do that. And, they can always reach out to us. Our number is 312-854-7065, and our website is swagatusa.com.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This
Thank
has been
you.
a
It's
really
been a pleasure.
meaningful interview. I really appreciate you being on the show, and I know in my own mind the thing that I get out of this is actually the name. Welcome. How can we learn to reframe our own thoughts and our own opinions, and recognize that we're here to welcome those, and we're here to help and to lift them in any way that we can, because it's more difficult for them than we realize. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're
Dana.
welcome.
I
Take
appreciate
care,
that.
and thank you for this opportunity. I love having this conversation.
Likewise. And folks, thanks for listening today. We hope you enjoyed it, and please listen to us again. Have a wonderful week.